Welcome, everyone, to the Fantasy Phoenix podcast. It's a very special one today because it's our first ever episode. Today, we're going to be talking all about NBL SuperCoach. Before we get started, though, I just wanted to give you all a little bit of a rundown and background information on me. I'm a long-time fantasy fanatic across multiple sports, but predominantly AFL, Fantasy and SuperCoach, FPL, and NBL, which in the old days was NBL Fantasy, but now is NBL SuperCoach. I've had some pretty decent seasons and successes over all of the forms of fantasy, but in terms of NBL in particular, in the old fantasy format, we had finishes of 11th, 23rd, and 100th. So not too bad for my last few years of playing. So whether you're a seasoned veteran or you're just trying to get started, hopefully I can pass on some of that knowledge to you and have a bit of fun along the way. Let's dive in and review round one of NBL SuperCoach. We had a pretty solid start to the year. We scored 439 points, which gets us ranked 71st, or equal 71st, which is in the top 1% of the competition, and it also puts us only 15 points behind first place, which is pretty good. I was in the same boat as many coaches that had Taron Armstrong and had to restructure in the lead up to the first lockout. I wanted to have some Cairns price rises in the mix, so I went a bit funky. I also wanted to have someone playable in round two. So I went from Taron Armstrong, Saar, and Kyron Galloway to Menenga, Henschel, and Clintman. Could have been worse. Definitely could have been a lot better. The DNP to Henschel game one really hurts, especially with how the price rise is going to work. But anyway, it is what it is. I've got no idea what John really was doing, but anyway, can't change that now. I went with Cotton as my captain. So, like a lot of people, I was pretty frustrated watching the early blowout of the Sem and Perth game, meaning the starters got put on ice with 6 or 7 minutes to go in the fourth. Not ideal, but it is what it is. I didn't have Creek, which was good in that regard, but I did have Cook, Cummings, and Air, as well as Cotton. And on the other hand, it did give Ben Henschel more opportunity to pile on the points, which was good for us in that regard. Looking at some of the top scores from the round, my starting five was made up of 5 out of the 8 highest scorers, which was very nice to see. The Delhi was the only one that I considered, but in the end, he only outscored Cummings by 3 points, and he's got one less game this week, so I think we'll take that as a win for sure. With more than half the teams on doubles this week, let's have a look at some of the players to potentially trade in or out in our buy, sell, keep, and avoid. So buy are going to be players that I think are good options to trade in if you don't already have them. Sell are players I think are options to trade out if you do own them. Keep are players that are being traded out by people, but I think you should consider keeping. And avoid are players that are being traded in by people, but I think you should consider looking in a different direction. Okay, so for buy, we've got Jalen Galloway. I started with Galloway with the news that Hogue was going to be missing for the first few weeks. Off the back of some solid blitz performances, and after watching him live on Saturday, is definitely my number one target if you do not already own him. 32 points shows he can score pretty well, and he's going to shoot up in price before you know it. For sell, sorry to everyone in the Red Army, but Bryce Cotton. With so many good players on doubles, you can't keep the most expensive player in the game on your bench on a single. Especially as he's more likely than not to lose value this week with a break even of 50, and moving him on allows you to spread that cash around and hopefully improve your team. A little bit of a bonus sell here is Majuk. He is in 26% of teams, and I have no idea why that is. Didn't play in the Blitz, couldn't play in round one, and that's even with Magne out. So I'm not sure why he was so highly selected to begin with, but if you've got him in your team, he needs to go now. Keep Lockie Olbrich. Coach Jackomas was a little bit all over the place in terms of rotations for the Hawks. There was obviously a lot of feedback from that on the telecast and post-match, and being in the building as well, it was interesting to say the least. When we felt there was a bit of momentum going, he kind of broke it up a bit, but obviously he's trying to figure out what lineups work, and I really think that Olbrich is going to be a big piece in that. Think of the Blitz game where he had, 32 points or whatever. That's obviously not what he's going to score every week, but I think he's going to be closer to that than the 10 points that he had against the Kings. He also still essentially doubled his break even. So, worst case scenario, in what may have very well been his least productive game for the year, I think you can keep him. I'm backing him in to improve on this performance for sure. And the avoid, the highest scoring player per game, obviously. He was, I think, fifth highest overall. But in one game, 57 points, we have Parker Jackson Cartwright. Now, don't get me wrong, this guy is legit. He had great performances in the Blitz, and he's carried that over into the season proper. But for those of you that are new to NBL Supercoach or NBL Fantasy formats, the main difference from other sports such as AFL, NRL, etc., is that the schedule is a little bit different. Teams don't play the same amount of games each week. They do across the year. You've got some teams that play twice one week and once another. Some teams that, in the case of New Zealand, they actually will have rounds with 0 games. So they had a single to start, a single this round coming, and then they have a donut next week when they go over to the US to play in the NBL and NBA crossover games. So despite his performance, he can't be considered until after they return in round 3, and potentially even after getting a look at him and McDowell White together. All right, now let's take a look at some captaincy options. So I'm going to go with the top 3. I think throughout the year, that's probably going to be the way that I want to do it. There might be some cases where there's more or less, but I'm pretty sure we want to stick to a top 3. So for this week, in number 3, we've got Jalen Adams. So Adams didn't really get out of second gear as the Kings took care of the Hawks, and after an interrupted preseason, he's only going to get better. His round 2 opponents gave up plenty to guards as well. The Jackies let Cotton go for 38 and Usher 36, while Adelaide gave up roughly 30 points on average to the starting guards of their opponents across round 1. So if you've got Jalen Adams in your team, you can feel pretty confident to put the C on him. Number 2, we've got Tyler Cook. This guy was absolutely cooking in the Blitz, pun intended.
Love it when he gets cooking.
And I see his scores increasing from round 1. All of the Phoenix players were very well held by United in the season opener. I think they're going to be a pretty strong defensive team and not necessarily ideal for our SuperCoach players. But he still managed a respectable 53 points over the round. And that included 6 turnovers as well, so it could have been a lot higher. The Breakers and the Kings bigs didn't necessarily dominate the Taipans or the Hawks in terms of SuperCoach scoring anyway. There was a lot of even spread in those games. But being at the WEC Live, seeing how poor Illawarra were on the glass, particularly controlling the rebounds after grabbing them, the amount of turnovers that they had after they grabbed the rebound and it would just be stolen away, or they'd fumble the board, or 2 guys are competing for the same rebound. Now, I'm sure the Hawks will tidy that up, but Cook's a stud, and I think he's really going to show it in round 2. As is his teammate, who is my number 1 choice for top captains of the round this week. So, Mitch Creek couldn't go any further. Just like Cook, he's got all the ingredients to go big this week. Was very close to a double-double in both games, and I'm locking him in for at least 1 this week. Add to that, he's an MVP caliber player, the second highest price guy in the game that I'm sure most people started with round 2 captaincy in mind. And most importantly, loves to have some fairy floss from the kids in the crowd. So you can't go against that. He's easily the number 1 captain option for round 2. So for my moves this week, it's likely going to be Cotton down to a Kings guard, and then either Clintman or Henschel up to someone that I think is going to score more and or go up more in cash. I mean, ideally both, but it's definitely going to be one of those 2. I'm currently undecided which Kings guard and also who would be on the other end of it. So going to have a little bit of a play around over the next day or so. We've got about 24 hours until the first lockout. Have to make a look at that early, but we'll see how we go. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Obviously, this was our first podcast, so if you've got any feedback, please let us know. If anyone's got any questions too, you can hit us up on Twitter or X, whatever we call it these days. So at @FantasyPhoenix_. I'll have that. So this will be posted on YouTube, I think Spotify and some other platforms. So I'll have it in descriptions as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll also see the video of the background where it is listed there too. But thanks again, everyone, and good luck for round 2. We'll see you in the next episode.